In 1 second, I went from being the help to the sole heir of $42 million. And I watched my family transform from indifferent relatives into dangerous enemies. My name is Ava Mitchell, I'm 31, and this is the story of how a $40 million fortune turned my own flesh and blood into vultures. Sunday afternoons at Great Uncle Silas's estate used to feel like a specific kind of penance. The house was a sprawling, Gothic revival monstrosity that sat on a hill overlooking the Hudson River, always smelling of lemon polish, old paper, and the expensive scotch Silas drank against his doctor's orders. For 5 years, I was the only person who drove up that winding driveway. I was the one who sorted his medication, argued with his insurance companies, and sat in the library listening to him complain about the state of the stock market. To the rest of the family, Silas was the miser, a grumpy, ancient relic they ignored unless they needed a loan. To me, he was just a lonely old man who was terrified of dying alone. If you enjoy real-life stories about family betrayal and justice, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. When Silas finally passed away on a rainy Tuesday in November, the silence in the house was deafening. I was holding his hand when the monitor flatlined. There were no movie-style last words, no dramatic revelations. Just a quiet exhale, and then he was gone. I sat there for an hour, just watching the rain streak against the window, feeling a profound sense of loss. He wasn't easy to love, he was stubborn, opinionated, and often rude, but he was my family. I didn't call the family immediately. I knew what would happen. I wanted him to have one last hour of peace before the chaos started. I was right. The moment I made the call to my Aunt Brenda, Silas's niece and my father's older sister, the tone shifted instantly. There were no tears. There was no crack in her voice. "Oh," she said, sounding breathless. "Is the lawyer there? Has the coroner come? Ava, don't let anyone touch the safe in the study. I'm on my way." She arrived in under 40 minutes, a record time considering she lived an hour away and hadn't visited Silas in 6 years. She swept into the hallway wearing a black coat that looked brand new, her eyes scanning the room not for memories, but for inventory. Following close behind her was my cousin Todd, 28 years old, unemployed, and currently scrolling on his phone. "Where is he?" Brenda asked, pulling off her leather gloves. "He's still in the bedroom, Aunt Brenda," I said softly. "The funeral home is on their way." Right, she muttered, already walking past me toward the living room. "God, look at this place. It's a museum. The upkeep must be costing a fortune. We'll have to list it immediately." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "He's been dead for 2 hours. Can we maybe not talk about selling his house yet?" Todd looked up from his phone, smirking. "Come on, Ava. Let's be real. The old guy was sitting on a gold mine. No point letting it gather dust. Hey, did he still have that vintage Jaguar in the garage? I've been eyeing that since I was 12. "He loved that car," I said, my voice tightening. "Well, he's not driving it anymore," Todd shrugged, walking toward the kitchen to raid the fridge. The next 3 days were a blur of performative grief. The funeral was held at the most expensive chapel in the city, organized entirely by Brenda. She cried loudly in the front pew, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, telling everyone who would listen how close she and Uncle C had been. She told stories I knew were lies, Sunday dinners that never happened, phone calls that were never made. My father, a quiet man who had always been intimidated by Brenda, just sat next to me, looking uncomfortable. "Let her have her moment," he whispered to me. "It keeps the peace." "It's not peace, Dad," I whispered back. "It's a performance." After the burial, the wake was held back at the estate. It felt less like a gathering of mourners and more like a celebratory open house. I watched my relatives walking around the library, picking up crystal decanters, checking the maker's marks on the silverware. They weren't remembering him, they were appraising him. I stood by the window, sipping lukewarm water, feeling like an intruder in the house I had managed for years. "Ava," Brenda's voice cut through the noise. She sidled up to me, a glass of wine in her hand. "The lawyer, Mr. Sterling, called. He wants to do the reading of the will tomorrow morning. Here. In the library." "Okay," I said. "I just want you to know," she lowered her voice, putting a hand on my arm. It felt heavy and cold. "Todd and I have been talking. We know Silas gave you a stipend for looking after him, but we want to be generous. Once the estate is settled, we're going to give you a nice bonus. Maybe enough for a down payment on a little apartment. You've been a good helper." Helper. That was the word that snapped something inside me. To them, I wasn't his grandniece. I wasn't the one who held his hand while he died. I was the hired help. I was an obstacle to be paid off so they could consume everything he had built. "I don't need a bonus, Brenda," I said, pulling my arm away. "Don't be proud, honey," she smiled, a tight, predatory expression. "It's going to be a lot of money. You'll want to be on our good side." I didn't know it then, but that moment would define everything that followed. I looked at her greed, her arrogance, her complete lack of respect for the man we had just buried, and I realized that Silas had been right about them all along. The next morning, the library felt colder than usual. We sat in a semicircle, Brenda, Todd, my father, and me. Mr. Sterling sat behind Silas's massive oak desk, a thick leather folder in front of him. He looked over his spectacles at us, his expression unreadable. Silas was a particular man, Mr. Sterling began, his voice gravelly. He made many changes to his will over the years. But this final version was executed 3 weeks ago. Brenda sat up straighter, gripping her purse. Todd stopped chewing his gum. I, Silas Edward Vance, being of sound mind and body, Mr. Sterling read, hereby revoke all prior wills and codicils. He paused. The room was so silent you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Regarding my real estate, my investment portfolios, and my liquid assets, valued collectively at approximately $42 million. Brenda inhaled sharply, a sound of pure avarice. I leave the entirety of the estate to one individual. Mr. Sterling looked up. He didn't look at Brenda. He looked at me. In 1 second, I went from being the help to the sole heir of $42 million. And I watched my family transform from indifferent relatives into dangerous enemies. Mr. Sterling's eyes didn't waver. He cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the heavy silence. To my grandniece, Ava Mitchell, I leave the entirety of my estate, including the property at Hudson Heights, all stocks, bonds, and personal effects. It is my hope that she uses these resources with the same compassion she showed me in my final years. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. The air in the room felt sucked out, replaced by a vacuum of pure shock. Then, Brenda screamed. It wasn't a cry of grief. It was a shriek of rage, guttural and ugly. She stood up so fast her chair tipped backward, crashing onto the hardwood floor with a sound like a gunshot. That's a lie, she shouted, her face twisting into a mask of red fury. She pointed a manicured finger at Mr. Sterling. You're lying. He would never do that. She's a nurse. She's nobody. Sit down, Mrs. Davis, Mr. Sterling said calmly, though his hand drifted toward the phone on the desk. I will not sit down. Brenda slammed her hands on the desk. She coerced him. Look at her. She spun around to face me. I was frozen in my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. You little snake. You spent 5 years poisoning him against us, didn't you? Whispering in his ear while you changed his bedpans. I never asked him for anything, I whispered. My voice sounded small, pathetic even to my own ears. Bullshit. Todd yelled. He wasn't on his phone anymore. He was standing next to his mother, his face flushed. You think you're walking away with $40 million? I'm the eldest grandson. It's my birthright. There is no such thing as birthright in this state, Mr. Sterling interjected, his voice turning steel hard. Silas was of sound mind. We have video documentation of the signing. We have 2 evaluations from his psychiatrist confirming his capacity. If you contest this, you will lose, and you will pay the legal fees for the estate. Brenda stared at him, her chest heaving. She looked at me again. The hatred in her eyes was so cold, so absolute, that I physically recoiled. This isn't over, she hissed. You think you can steal my father's legacy? I will bury you in litigation until you don't have a dime left to buy scrubs. She grabbed her purse and stormed out. Todd followed, but not before kicking the antique globe by the door, sending it crashing off its axis. My father sat there, stunned, looking at me like I was a stranger. Ava, he said softly. 40 million? I didn't know, Dad, I said, tears finally spilling over. I swear, I didn't know. He stood up slowly. He didn't hug me. He didn't congratulate me. He just looked tired. You should have told us, he said. And then he walked out, leaving me alone with the lawyer and the fortune I never asked for. Mr. Sterling sighed, taking off his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. I warned Silas this would happen. He told me he didn't care. He said watching them show their true colors would be his final entertainment. He slid a heavy envelope across the desk. He left this for you. Personal instructions. I took the envelope. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open the flap. Inside was a single sheet of Silas's personalized stationery, covered in his scrawling, shaky handwriting. My dearest Ava, if you are reading this, the vultures have probably just stormed out. Good riddance. They think money is a prize. It isn't. It's a magnifying glass. It shows you who people really are. They didn't visit me because they loved me, they visited me because they were calculating my expiration date. You were the only one who ever asked me how I slept. You were the only one who made tea the way I liked it, not because I paid you, but because you cared. I am giving you this burden because I trust you to know the difference between price and value. Don't let them bully you. Don't let them guilt you. Do what is right. Love, Uncle C. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried. I cried for the lonely old man who had to buy his family's attention, and I cried for myself, because I knew the war had just begun. That night, I stayed in the estate. I was technically the owner now, but I felt like a trespasser. I locked the bedroom door. I checked the windows. The house, usually my sanctuary, felt hostile. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Enjoy the money while you can. We know about the nursing board complaint in 2019. It would be a shame if that resurfaced during a probate hearing. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. The complaint in 2019 was frivolous, a misunderstanding with a patient's angry ex-husband that was dismissed immediately. But the fact that they dug it up? That they were already weaponizing my history? They weren't just going to sue me. They were going to destroy me. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark grounds of the estate. The rain had stopped, leaving a heavy mist over the river. Silas had given me a fortune, but he hadn't given me a shield. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. If you want to fight, Brenda, I'll give you one. But I didn't know it then, fighting them wasn't the hard part. The hard part would be figuring out how to win without becoming exactly like them. The next morning, the threat against my nursing license wasn't just a text message, it was a headline. I woke up to my phone blowing up. Not with congratulations, but with links. A local gossip blog, one that Brenda frequented, had run a story, "Did local nurse coerce dementia patient into changing will?" The article was filled with anonymous sources, claiming that I had isolated Silas, restricted family access, and medicated him into compliance. It was a work of fiction, but in a small town, fiction travels faster than truth. I drove to Mr. Sterling's office with my sunglasses on, terrified someone would recognize me. The town that had been my home for 31 years suddenly felt like a battlefield. Mr. Sterling looked at the printout of the article and sighed, tossing it into the trash. "It's a classic shakedown, Ava," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "They're trying to scare you into a settlement. If they can make the probate process painful enough, they think you'll cut them a check just to make it stop." "Is it going to work?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Can they actually take my license?" "No. The medical records are impeccable. But they can drag your name through the mud for years. And frankly..." He paused, looking at me with a pity that I hated. "Brenda is desperate. I didn't want to violate client confidentiality, but you're the executor now, so you have a right to know. Brenda is insolvent." I blinked. "What?" "She drives a Range Rover. She goes to Europe twice a year. She's living on credit," Sterling explained. "She leveraged her house to the hilt, assuming she would pay it off with Silas's money. Todd has gambling debts in the mid-six figures. They aren't just greedy, Ava. They are drowning. And drowning people will pull anyone down to survive." That changed everything. They weren't fighting for a bonus, they were fighting for their lives. And that made them dangerous. When I got back to my apartment, I still hadn't moved into the estate. My father was sitting in his car in my driveway. Seeing him felt like a relief at first. I thought, finally, someone is on my side. I was wrong. I invited him in. I made coffee. We sat at my small kitchen table, the same table where I used to do my homework while he graded papers. "This is getting out of hand, Ava," he said, staring into his mug. She's spiraling. She's talking about hiring a forensic accountant. She's talking about exhuming the body to test for toxicity." I dropped my spoon. It clattered loudly against the ceramic. "Exhuming him? Dad, that's insane. He died of heart failure." "I know," he said quickly. "I know. But she's not going to stop. Look, honey, $42 million is a lot of money. Too much money for one person, really." The air in the kitchen went still. I looked at him, realizing where this was going. "What are you saying, Dad?" "I'm saying, maybe you just give them half," he suggested, his voice pleading. $20 million is still more than you'll ever need. If you give Brenda half, she'll drop the lawsuits. The articles stop. We can be a family again." "A family?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You want me to pay her $20 million to stop abusing me? That's not a settlement, Dad. That's a ransom." "It's peace," he snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "Do you want to spend the next 10 years in court? Do you want to be the reason your cousin goes to jail for debt? Just write the check, Ava. Be the bigger person. I'm not the one exhuming a dead man." I shouted back. "Why are you protecting her? Why are you always protecting her?" "Because she's my sister," he yelled. "And because if she goes down, she takes the rest of us with her. She borrowed money from me, Ava. A lot of money. If she doesn't get her inheritance, I lose my retirement." The truth hung in the air like smoke. He wasn't a peacemaker. He was an investor. He had bet on Silas's death just like the rest of them. "Get out," I whispered. "Ava. Get out." He left. I locked the door and slid down to the floor, sobbing until my chest ached. I realized then that Mr. Sterling was right. The money wasn't a gift, it was a curse. As long as the money sat in my name, I would never be Ava Mitchell again. I would just be a walking bank vault that my family was trying to crack open. I needed to end this. Not by winning, and not by surrendering. I needed to remove the target from my back. I wiped my face. I stood up. I walked to my desk and pulled out the estate portfolio Mr. Sterling had given me. I looked at the list of assets. The stocks, the bonds, the Hudson property. Silas had written, "I trust you to know the difference between price and value." I picked up the phone and called Mr. Sterling. It was 8 p.m., but he answered on the first ring. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. "I have a question." "Go ahead, Ava. The will says the assets are mine to do with as I please, right? There are no stipulations? No trusts I have to wait for? It's all yours, effective immediately. Why? And if I were to dispose of the assets before the probate challenge is fully filed, can I do that?" There was a long pause on the other end. "Technically, yes. As the executor and sole beneficiary, you have broad powers. But what are you planning, Ava?" I looked out the window at the dark street where my father's car had been. "I'm planning to follow Silas's instructions," I said. "I'm going to do what's right." "Ava," he warned. "Don't do anything rash." "It's not rash," I said. "It's the only way to kill the virus. I need you to set up a meeting with the board of directors for St. Jude's Hospital. And the Humane Society. And the Wounded Warrior Project." "All of them?" "All of them," I said. "Tomorrow." Giving away $42 million isn't as easy as writing a check. It takes paperwork, lawyers, and a level of adrenaline I had never experienced in my life. Mr. Sterling looked at me across his desk the next morning, his pen hovering over the final signature line. The stack of documents was 3 inches thick. We had spent 12 hours structuring the transfers, irrevocable donations, endowment funds, and immediate liquidations of stock. "Ava," he said, his voice serious. "Once you sign this, it is gone. There is no change of mind clause. You are transferring the entirety of the Silas Vance estate to these 5 charities. You are leaving yourself with nothing but the stipend Silas already gave you." "I'm leaving myself with my freedom," I corrected him. "And I'm keeping the Hudson house, right? Just the building?" "Yes. The real estate title is transferred to your name, but the liquid fortune, that goes to the Children's Hospital, the Animal Shelter, and the Veterans Fund." "Good," I said. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. For the first time since Silas died, I felt light. I signed my name. Ava Mitchell. It was done. The wire transfers were scheduled to execute at 2 p.m. At 2:15 p.m., my phone rang. It was Brenda. "We're at the house," she said, her voice dripping with triumphant smugness. "Your father said you're ready to talk settlement. We have the notary here. Don't be late." They thought I was coming to surrender. They thought I was coming to hand over the $20 million my father had begged for. I drove up the winding driveway of the estate one last time as a wealthy woman. The sun was shining, a stark contrast to the storm inside the house. When I walked into the library, the scene was almost comical. Brenda sat in Silas's favorite leather chair, holding a glass of champagne. Todd was leaning against the mantelpiece, looking like he had already spent his share on a new sports car. My father was pacing by the window, looking pale and anxious. Finally, Brenda said, setting her glass down. "I'm glad you came to your senses, Ava. This whole thing was getting embarrassing." She slid a document across the desk. "My lawyer drew this up. It splits the liquid assets 50-50 between you and me. I'm being generous, really. I could have gone for the whole thing." I didn't sit down. I didn't look at the document. I stood at the end of the long oak table, clutching a simple manila folder. "I'm not signing that, Brenda," I said quietly. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Brenda's smile vanished. "Excuse me?" "Your father said." "My father was wrong," I interrupted. "I didn't come here to split the money. I came here to tell you that there is no money to split." Todd laughed, a nervous, barking sound. "What are you talking about? The accounts have $42 million in them. We saw the statements." "Had," I corrected. "They had $42 million. I opened my folder and laid the 5 donation receipts out on the table. They were stamped, notarized, and confirmed. "As of 2 p.m. today," I said, my voice ringing clear and steady, "the Silas Vance estate has been liquidated. $20 million has been donated to St. Jude's Research Hospital. $10 million to the Wounded Warrior Project. $5 million to the Humane Society." "Stop it," Brenda whispered. Her face had gone chalk white. "And the remaining $7 million has been placed in a scholarship fund for underprivileged nursing students," I finished. "It's gone. All of it." For a moment, there was absolute silence. It was the silence of a bomb that has landed but hasn't detonated yet. Then, Brenda lunged. She didn't just scream, she launched herself across the table, clawing at the papers. You lying little bitch. You can't do that. That's my money. That's my money. My father grabbed her by the waist, holding her back as she thrashed, knocking the champagne glass onto the floor. It shattered, spraying sparkling wine over the receipts. It's irrevocable. I shouted over her, screaming. Call Mr. Sterling. The wires have cleared. It's over, Brenda. You're insane. Todd yelled, his eyes bulging. He grabbed the papers, reading them frantically, looking for a loophole. Mom, she actually did it. The transaction IDs are here. It's all gone. Brenda let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a howl of pure, financial agony. She collapsed against my father, sliding to the floor, sobbing. My house, she wailed. They're going to take my house. I needed that money. I promised the bank. My father looked at me. His eyes were wide with horror. Ava, what have you done? You bankrupted us. You bankrupted your own family. No, I said, feeling a cold, hard resolve. I didn't bankrupt you. You spent money you didn't have waiting for a man to die. You did this to yourselves. I will sue you. Brenda shrieked from the floor, her makeup smeared, her composure shattered. I will sue you for every penny. I will sue the charities. I will get it back. You can try, I said. But you'll be suing St. Jude's. You'll be suing puppies and veterans. Go ahead, Brenda. See how that plays out in the media. You wanted a war? You wanted to drag my name through the mud? Go ahead. Tell the world you're trying to take money away from children with cancer. She froze. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She couldn't sue. If she tried, she would be the most hated woman in America. I hadn't just given the money away, I had put it in a fortress of public goodwill that she couldn't touch without destroying herself. I turned to leave. Wait, Todd said, his voice trembling. What about the car? The Jaguar? I stopped at the door. Sold, I said. Proceeds went to the local food bank. I walked out of the library, leaving them in the wreckage of their own greed. I walked out to my car, and for the first time in 5 years, the air at Hudson Heights tasted sweet. But as I drove away, I saw a police cruiser turning into the driveway. Brenda hadn't called them. Mr. Sterling had. Because while Brenda was screaming about the money, she had forgotten one thing. In her blind rage, she had admitted to promising the bank money she didn't have. And that sounded a lot like fraud. The police didn't arrest Brenda that afternoon, but they did serve her with papers that effectively ended her life as she knew it. Mr. Sterling had been thorough. When Brenda had leveraged her own home and taken out bridge loans to maintain her lifestyle, she had listed the Silas Vance estate as guaranteed collateral. She had shown the bank forged letters she claimed were from Silas promising her the money. That is called bank fraud. And when the news broke that the estate was empty, the banks didn't wait. They called the loans. I watched from the library window as the officers handed her the summons. The screaming had stopped. Brenda looked like a deflated balloon, gray and hollow. She didn't look at me as she walked to her car. She looked at the ground, finally crushed by the weight of the reality she had tried to outrun. The next 6 months were a slow, public dismantling of the Davis family facade. Brenda declared bankruptcy. Her Range Rover was repossessed. Her house, the one she was so proud of, went into foreclosure. The local papers, the same ones she had tried to use to smear me, turned on her. The headline, "Socialite Scams Bank on Promise of Inheritance," replaced the hit piece about my nursing license. Todd didn't fare much better. Without his mother's credit cards or the promise of a golden parachute, his creditors came knocking. I heard through the grapevine that he had to sell his watch collection and take a job at a car dealership in the next county. And then there was my father. He didn't lose his house, but he lost something he valued more, his pride. He had loaned Brenda nearly half of his retirement savings, convinced it was a safe bet. That money was gone. He called me 3 weeks after the confrontation. Ava, he said. His voice was cracked, lacking the authoritative tone he used to use. I wanted to say happy birthday. It wasn't my birthday. What do you want, Dad? I asked, sitting on the back porch of Silas's estate. I'm struggling, honey, he admitted. The lawyer fees for Brenda. I tried to help her with the fraud charges, and now I'm in a tight spot. I know you gave the bulk of the money away, but you still have the house. It's worth a few million. If you sold it, I closed my eyes. Even now. Even after everything. He still saw me as a resource. He still saw Silas's legacy as a piggy bank to smash open. I'm not selling the house, Dad, I said softly. But what are you going to do with it? Live there alone like a hermit? Like Silas? No, I said. I'm turning it into a recovery center. A what? A respite center for families of children undergoing long-term cancer treatment. Since I donated the money to St. Jude's, we're partnering. The estate will house families who can't afford hotels while their kids are in the hospital. There was silence on the line. Long, baffled silence. He couldn't comprehend it. To him, an asset was only valuable if it could be liquidated. You're throwing it away, he whispered. You're throwing everything away. I'm using it, I said. And Dad? Don't call me again asking for money. If you want to see me, you can come to the center and volunteer. You can mow the lawn. You can paint the walls. But the Bank of Ava is closed. He hung up. He hasn't visited. I wasn't surprised. The renovation took a year. I used the stipend Silas had left me, the modest amount I had saved from my nursing salary, to fix up the bedrooms. I kept the library exactly as it was, including the leather chair where Silas used to sit. When the first family moved in, a young couple from Ohio with a 4-year-old daughter named Lily, the house finally felt alive. The gloom was gone. The smell of lemon polish and old paper was replaced by the smell of cooking and the sound of cartoons playing on the TV in the living room. I stood in the foyer yesterday, watching Lily chase a golden retriever puppy through the hall. The puppy was a rescue, adopted from the Humane Society with the funds I had donated. Mr. Sterling stopped by for a visit. He looked different these days, less stressed, more prone to smiling. You know, he said, leaning on his cane as he watched the kids play. Silas would have hated the noise. I laughed. He would have despised it. He would have banged his cane on the floor and told them to pipe down. Yes, Sterling agreed. But he would have loved that Brenda isn't here. That, he would have loved. I walked Mr. Sterling to his car. The sun was setting over the Hudson, painting the river in shades of purple and gold. It was the same view Silas had looked at for 80 years. Do you regret it? Sterling asked suddenly. $42 million. You could have been on a yacht in the Mediterranean right now. I looked back at the house. I saw the lights coming on in the kitchen. I saw the young father lifting his daughter up to see out the window. I thought about the letters of thanks I had received from the nursing students who got scholarships. I thought about Brenda, living in a rented condo, bitter and alone, still blaming everyone but herself. I thought about the weight that had lifted off my shoulders the moment I signed those papers. No, I said honestly. I don't regret it. The money was poison, Mr. Sterling. It would have turned me into them. I'd rather be a nurse who sleeps at night than a millionaire who has to watch her back. He nodded, tipping his hat. Silas knew. He always said you were the only one with a backbone. I watched him drive away, then turned back to the house. My inheritance wasn't the millions. My inheritance was the ability to walk through that front door with my head held high, knowing that when my family fought over the price of everything, I was the only one who understood the value of doing the right thing. And that? That is worth more than $40 million.